Okay, so I'm gonna make an attempt at a little blending video. I'm not very good at explaining things, but I'm gonna give it a good try. Sorry about the lack of eyebrows. That happened, so I'm sorry. You have to look at this. But I always do my blending before I put on eyebrows because I just blend up there and that would be bad. So, you know, here we are. Anyway, I always start off with the dust the end finishing powder just all around my eye socket and just a very light layer over my actual eyelid and everything. I have concealer and foundation on already. Oh gee, I'm sorry. You'll have to deal with me. So as a base, I'm going to use College Life just to make things blend out better. You can barely see it, it's very, you know, a very pale yellow. Ooh. Just tapped this and it went everywhere into my other colors that I have open as well. But, you know, that's life. So I basically just barely touch a big fluffy brush to my skin and just, you know, feather it out, dust it on words and such. Sorry if I dip out of frame. Alright, so I use Familiarity and Disappointment as a transition. Definitely one of my all-time favorite colors. I've gone through like 2 jars so far. Have another on the way. This one's almost out. So basically, first I pat it where I want to go. Or like just gently place. What is that? We don't know. Okay. On the outer corner, if I'm kind of like swiping, I swipe inwards because otherwise it wrinkles up if I go this way, even with like barely any pressure. Because my EDS makes my skin super gooey. So it barely takes anything to move it. That's why I don't do the swirling motions when I blend, because that just turns it into a disgusting little whirlpool. And nobody likes that. Makes like these weird lines and it just doesn't do it evenly. So I do more of a like, it's like you're shading with a pencil or something and barely using any pressure. It tends to wrinkle in the inner part too, so I try to go out with that. It's kind of the opposite of the outer corner. I always bring it under. I have this like highlighter brush. I really don't remember if I already said that it's a highlighter brush, but we don't use it for that. But I usually just have nothing on it, or you know, whatever's left of the end finishing powder. and I just barely touch my skin and dust the edges out, and that really helps it blend into my face, and you know, can't tell where the beginning, there's no harsh lines, basically. Need more under. I have a lot of little scars, so it kind of makes it hard to blend. Whatever. So next shade, we're going to use a smaller brush again. And just gonna kind of poke around where we want the color, just ever so gently. Went a little high there, but we're gonna just blend that out. So now that, just disregard me, I'm sorry. Now that we have the color basically where we want it, I usually take the previous brush and just gently sketch out, you know, dust out those edges right there. I'll take the smaller brush again and just, I don't know, ever so gently you know, I don't know. It's like I'm petting it. I don't know how to describe this. It's like gently petting the line till it goes away. Told you I would be, I mean, you've been warned. I'm not good at describing what I'm doing. I just kind of do it. I'm gonna go back in, maybe brighten up that familiarity and disappointment, just a hair, and blend it a little bit more. Oh, it's going up in that eyebrow, oh my gosh. But that's basically how I blend in general. I always, I do each color usually at the same time, like I'll just jump from eye to eye. I'm not used to doing this whole one eye at once thing. to try to make a match. I don't know, it's easier for me to kind of make them more symmetrical. Just that little brush. I'm gonna go back in with the green and drag it, you know, under my eye. And I think just the key in general for me is using the small brushes and just the really light pressure. It's kind of hard to find brushes that are both soft and, you know, flexible and whatnot, and tiny, because usually the small ones are like more stiff, and that's no good for my purposes. That's pretty much it. It looks like that took a really long time. I am so sorry. Okay. I'm going to quickly try to show you how I blend out black eyeshadow into colors. So that's something I struggled with for a long time. I always use a really small fluffy brush for the black, just so I keep it as concentrated as possible so it doesn't completely cover up the other colors. Because if you use a big brush, it's just going to kind of go everywhere and make everything muted and muddy. So I usually just kind of hold the brush like angled backwards and just gently pat some on to the outer lid area there. I always try to angle up so it doesn't look, you know, droopy. It kind of lifts. Although I do, you know, sometimes droopy's the look, and I like it. So, you know, you do you. I always start off with just a little bit of product and add more. The more I get used to using Bloody Awful Poet, though, the more I'm comfortable with putting more on my brush. But at first, it took me forever, because I'd use such a tiny amount. I'm just kind of patting and, you know, poking the area. Oops, that was kind of a lot. But we'll make it work. As long as you just keep it in that area, it's not a disaster that you use like a lot. Except for the fallout. It's kind of a disaster. That's the only problem with using a lot. But I powder first with the end finishing powder, and that makes it just usually just like, I don't know, swipe it off or do this, and it gets rid of all that fallout for me. So I kind of have it more or less in the right area. I have it so when my eye is somewhat relaxed, it peaks up and is on my little flap. It's really disgusting. Sorry. Like poking at it. God, I'm so sorry. That was pretty bad. Alright, anyway. once we get to this point where it's kind of like a harsh line, I start just barely touching the brush to my skin and moving just little kind of shading motions, like I'm using a graphite pencil. As I've said before, I do not use the circular motions for blending because my skin is very gooey, and because I have EDS, and it just swirls around and makes weird patterns, and it's not good for a smooth blended look. It's not ideal. But if that works for you, I mean, you know, you do it. I probably would be doing it if I could. I'm going back in with the brush I used with Douglas Firs to just kind of, I don't know, intensify that a little bit and help it blend into the color more. Make sure we don't lose that pigment. But I used really pigmented shades today, so it could show up on camera better. So I always just kind of go back and forth with all of the colors just to make sure it's blended all hell. And I take a really small brush and I start dragging it under the eye too. I don't actually drag it, but you know, I poke it till it's under the eye. Sorry if I'm dipping out of frame. I have 1 minute left of space on my SD card. I best wrap it up. I just keep going back and forth till I'm happy with it, or content. Yeah, it's pretty good. Good enough for me at least. Alright, I'm sorry. Bye.